Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Thursday morning by Andrew Erickson and Derek Brown, as I am every Thursday morning. Guys, we are talking some must-sits today as we head into Week 7. We will start where we always start, which is with the running backs, and we'll start with Andrew Erickson. Erickson, who's your number one must-sit running back of Week 7?
I don't want to play Keaontay Ingram for the Arizona Cardinals. I'm afraid of his matchup here. I don't like it. Seattle's rush defense is really good this year. 3.2 yards per carry allowed, 6th fewest rushing yards allowed per game. And when you look at what happened with Ingram last week, yes, he was like the starter and he got the most carries, but he didn't play the most snaps because Arizona was trailing and DBro actually played the most snaps and was actually on the field the entire second half, basically. Like, Ingram had one carry in the second half in the entire game. So I'm concerned that if the Cardinals fall behind the Seahawks, that Ingram is going to get neutralized already in a bad matchup. So I wouldn't go chasing what he did last week in the box score, even as like an RB3, because the matchup is bad and he's one-dimensional in terms of he's only going to be operating on early downs and he's probably going to have to score a touchdown to you'd pay off starting him this week. So Keaontay Ingram for me is someone that I want to get away from.
Do you have interest in anybody in this backfield?
Not particular, no. I really don't. Again, it's kind of a mess. They showed us they want to use 3 different guys. Like, they brought Damian Williams back from the grave, and they're using him. They're using DeMarcado. Like, he's playing a lot of snaps, and then Ingram is just working, on early down. So it's not. No one's seeing that James Conner workload, and that was what was saving James Conner, was his workload in a overall bad offense. So for me, it's really want to shy away, especially the matchup is really bad.
DBro, who's your top must-sit running back?
You're going to hate this, Worm. It's Gus Edwards, baby. And this all comes down to the matchup.
I agree with it. You're not wrong here.
I mean, it's twofold. It's not only the matchup, but the fact that Justice Hill over the last few weeks has gotten more red zone carries than Gus Edwards. Yeah, so let that sink in, people. Smaller back versus the bus has gotten less red zone carries. And now you stack this up. I mean, Detroit, we've been talking about this for weeks, guys. They're an elite run defense. They have allowed the 3rd lowest explosive run rate. They have the 12th highest stuff rate. I want no part of Gus Edwards. Like, rank him as an RB4. Don't play him. I will roll out incredibly thin wide receiver plays in my flex play just to go with matchups over starting Gus Edwards.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the Ravens are doing with the backfield because I just like Gus Edwards better than Justice Hill. Justice Hill has had some explosive runs this year. He's also fumbled a lot. And Gus Edwards is just very reliable, particularly near the goal line. He's been really good in his career at scoring touchdowns, and they're just not using him that way this year, or they're using Lamar when they're down there, which is fine. But yeah, it's been a little frustrating as somebody who was pretty heavily invested in Gus Edwards. Do you like Edwards or Hill? Not this week, because again, it's a tough run defense regardless, but DBro, rest of season, do you have a preference between Edwards or Justice Hill?
I'll take Justice Hill, but we're parsing between the lesser of two evils here. I think that considering how bad both of them have played, if you look at their efficiency metrics, it might honestly, and I was not on this bandwagon, it might honestly be time to stash Keaton Mitchell.
I do have him stashed only in super deep leagues, but I do have him stashed just in case, because you're right. I mean, we haven't really seen the big breakout from either of these two current guys that we expected. Erickson, give me your next must-sit guy.
Alexander Mattison is playing the 49ers this week. It's a horrible matchup. They're allowing fewer than 60 rushing yards per game to running backs. Look, Alexander Mattison has not been good really all year. He's been getting by with volume, and we've seen Cam Akers somewhat work into his workload at times. This past week, we didn't really see it play out, with Mattison really taking on a larger role in the receiving game, and that's ultimately what kind of got the job done for him against the Chicago Bears. We talked about last week as underrated run defense. Mattison still was productive in the receiving game, so he did enough for you if you did start him. But in this week, it's just the matchup's not there, and Mattison has not earned the efficiency that we would expect for him to overcome this matchup. I mean, the Vikings offense was so bad last week overall without Justin Jefferson. Like, I was shocked at how bad that they played, specifically on 3rd downs. like they could not convert anything. They couldn't sustain any type of drive. And I don't think that's going to change against a pissed off 49ers team that just lost to the Browns and PJ Walker. So Kirk Cousins primetime, like this is a bad spot for like, I think the entire Vikings offense. The 49ers could get Dre Greenlaw back, who wasn't playing last week, one of their main linebackers. So I think this is a game where we start to see Mattison probably get exposed more than we have at any point this season. So I'm trying to sit him.
DBro, where do you have Mattison this week?
Oh, guys, 6 teams on bye. Low end RB2 is an adventure. I'm not telling you it's a choose your own adventure and you like what happens. It is a choose your own adventure. You're like, it might be Indiana Jones out here, man. Like there's buzzsaws coming out the wall and stuff. I don't know what's going to happen. So I've got him in that range of like low end RB2, but oh, good Lord, I don't feel good about it. I really don't. I've got him at RB23, but I'll throw this to you, Erickson. Would you rather start Alexander Mattison or Kareem Hunt? Because I'm really considering putting Kareem Hunt over Alexander Mattison.
I mean, Kareem Hunt's still like in a committee. So I would, I mean, I don't know. Like, does Kareem Hunt have more juice than Alexander Madison does at this point? I mean, do we? How many points is the Brown offense is going to score with PJ Walker? He was horrible last week. Again,
how many points are the Vikings going to score? I mean, you just laid the case out, man. Like,
I mean, I'll probably start Mattison in that particular case just because he's the starter on his team and he's going to play more snaps. Like, that's basically what I'm trying to do here. But again, if I don't have to start any of these guys as RB2s, like I'm going to flex somebody else. I'll flex a wide receiver that I just think has way more upside than a lot of these running backs. That the back end RB2 tier is just in bad shape this week.
It's bad, man. Like when you get past RB14.
I do like you breaking up the buys because when you sent me your names for the must sits, both you guys, I looked and was looking at some of the rankings and I was like, these guys are ranked kind of high for must sits, but it's just that there's nothing there. 6 teams on bye. This is only the first of 2 weeks we have this year with 6 teams on bye. The others in week 13, so that will be another fun one. Guys, you know fall is unquestionably my favorite season. There's nothing I love more than seeing the colors change, feeling that crisp autumn breeze. Just feels like football, right? I love fall camping, going to games, pretty much any outdoor activity this time of year. The only thing better, spending fall outside with friends and with beer, but not just any beer. Miller Lite, the 96-calorie beer that tastes like beer and is perfectly brewed for everything summer and fall have to offer. I love talking about my softball team on this show. We are wrapping up the fall season next week with a doubleheader, and you all know that we'll be celebrating a fun season together with an after party, looking back on all the memories and new friends we made this year, fully stocked up with a couple of cases of Miller Lite. With a Miller Lite in your hand, fall doesn't just taste great, it tastes like Miller time. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. That's MillerLite.com/FantasyPros, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. DBro, get me your next must-sit running back.
I feel like, unfortunately, this guy makes the list on a lot of weeks, and I'm just not in on him. That's Rachaad White. Talking about the adventures of low-end RB2 land. Rachaad White's not been good this year, despite all of the snap share. He's 6th in snap share, 12th in opportunity share. He's even top 12 in red zone touches, and he has not been great. He's 40th in yards per touch, and you look at the matchup this week against the Falcons, they've been a lockdown defense versus running backs. So they have the 10th best stuff rate, and they've allowed the 12th lowest yards per carry on zone runs, which account for 57% of Rachaad White's carries. So I'm never enamored to play Rachaad White. Definitely not this week.
Yeah, White is somebody that I was pretty low on going into the season, relative to consensus. And you're right. It's like the volume, sure, but just hasn't looked good. Erickson, I know White is a guy that you liked, during draft season. So what do you make of him at this point?
I mean, he just doesn't have. I mean, if the matchup's good, he hits, and if it's not, he doesn't do anything. Like he's a volume-based RB2. Like he's giving you a floor every week because he gets the volume. And again, it's not all on him because no one in this backfield can run the football. Like they've tried Keyshawn Vaughn, they've tried Sean Tucker. Like all these guys are doing horrible. So part of it does have to do with the run blocking of the offensive line. It's been really bad. They've been really good pass blocking. I think that he's underwhelmed as a receiver. I expected a little bit more out of him as a receiver with Baker Mayfield at quarterback, but he hasn't really seen super high target share. He only has one game with more than 3 catches. So for me, it's really about like matchup. Like he's a matchup bait. Like you can see him against the Bears. He had his best week of the year. And then every other matchup, I mean, he's had tough matchups. Mostly again, last week was the Lions. Like I took his under on his rushing yards prop, and that came in very easily. And again, it's another tough matchup against the Falcons. So unfortunately, White is someone you're kind of like stuck with. You can't really move him because he does have some value with the floor, but at the same time, like his upside is limited unless he gets softer matchups.
Erickson, I'll stick with you for your last must-sit running back.
Jonathan Taylor. Colts are playing the Browns. Browns have an elite defense, basically against every single position. They're allowing the 4th fewest rushing yards per game to running backs, and Jonathan Taylor continues to split time with Zach Moss. Like, yes, his role increased last week, but at the same time, Zach Moss still played more snaps. Zach Moss still scored a touchdown. Zach Moss was still involved in the receiving game. Like, is he going to go away? Is he going to turn back into a pumpkin? I know it's autumn, and I know it's your favorite time of year, Worm, but I don't know if we're going to see Moss go away fully where you can trust JT to get enough volume to overcome a tough matchup. So that's always the play with running backs is, okay, if they're getting all the volume, don't really care who they're playing. They can overcome it. But if he's still continuing to split snap 50-50, especially if he's not even seeing all the goal line work, okay, then we have question marks about what JT can do. Now, again, based on the bye weeks, you probably can't sit him. So it's really more of a, hey, like temper expectations with JT. And again, I wouldn't be playing Zach Moss. Like I wanted to bench Zach Moss last week and he scored a touchdown. So that really kind of got him to the promised land if you had started him. But I really don't want to play any of these Colts running backs because you're just hoping for another more garbage time from Gardner Minshew like we got last week. But that's not guaranteed in a much tougher matchup against an elite Browns defense.
Jonathan Taylor is RB16 in the expert consensus rankings in half PPR. Is that too high, too low, or just right, Erickson?
I think it's just right. I mean, when you think about Jonathan Taylor, like he's kind of viewed as like a top 5 running back, and then you're also considering there are 6 teams on bye week, and he's not even an RB1. So I think that it's accurate. Again, it's really hard to bench him. It's like, what are your alternatives? I know DBro brought up like Kareem Hunt on the other side of that game. It's like I probably still start Jonathan Taylor, but I mean, he also hasn't been good like since he's come back. Now that's because he's rusty because he missed so much time, but he has zero rushing attempts over 5 yards. He's averaging 2.6 yards per carry this year. Now it's a small sample size, but we have yet to see him rip off any big runs, which Zach Moss has ripped off some big runs. So yeah, still concerned about JT as his coming back slowly after he kind of held out and had that injury.
Yeah, DBro, no explanation, but same question. RB16, Jonathan Taylor, too high, too low, just right?
Just right. I've got him at RB18.
Okay.
I think that's where
let's stick with you for the last must-sit running back here, DBro.
Well, it's going to hurt my heart, but you're probably going to have to start him just because 6 teams on a bye, but you need to temper expectations. Last week was rough, and who knows what it looks like going forward for James Cook. When the Bills decided that they want to run Latavius Murray inside the 20 more than James Cook, their most explosive running back on the roster, we've got a problem, people. Latavius Murray last week, 4 red zone opportunities. James Cook 1. You look at the matchup versus New England, it's not great. 9th lowest explosive run rate allowed. 2nd lowest yards per after contact per attempt. It's just, this is a matchup where you're probably going to see a lot of Josh Allen running, a lot of passing, a lot of Stephon Diggs, and who knows what kind of workload James Cook gets in this game. So I know you probably cannot sit him considering 6 teams on a bye, but if you're considering James Cook for your flex, I would probably look elsewhere.
Man, what a state of affairs. Let's go to the Who Should I Start tool, free to use at fantasypros.com/start. You guys can head there yourselves, put in your own starter sit questions, up to 4 players at a time, which is nice if you have more than just a head-to-head you're trying to decide from. You can even pick and choose which experts your decision draws from if you'd like to do that as well. Again, that's free to use at fantasypros.com/start. Erickson, would you start Keaontay Ingram or Justice Hill? That's actually 50-50 in the tool this week.
I'd probably start Justice Hill because he's involved in the passing game. So that's the way you can get away from the Detroit Lions' elite run defense. Like if Hill's catching passes outside of the backfield, I know Ingram's not going to catch any passes.
Yeah. How about Alexander Mattison or a guy DBro picked, Rachaad White?
Oh my God. What was it? So it was Rachaad White, and who was the other guy? Sorry,
Alexander Mattison.
Mattison.
It's so bad he just forgot about it. He's just like, oh, I got
This is
my brain
also
space.
50-50.
I'm starting Rachaad White. I liked him more. I've been fading. I tell people to trade Mattison every single week.
I know.
And I'm not turning back now. I have White run one spot ahead, so it even matches my rankings.
Prepping for our Tuesday buy or sell show is a weekly battle of you wanting to pick Alexander Mattison again as your sell high running back and me saying we need to talk about other players.
I mean, at that point, it's just a bit, man. Like, how many weeks can you do it in a row?
I don't know.
Yeah, until people complain. DBro, who would you take in that one, actually? Mattison or Rachaad White?
Ugh. I'm going to go Alexander Mattison, but
You can't do it.
it's so bad.
I was watching something. I was like one of the press conferences from the Vikings, and the comments from the Vikings fans about Alexander Mattison. They are so fed up with him. They're like, we do not want this guy at all. They're like, why is Akers not playing more? Why is Akers not taking over the job? And this is from like diehard Vikings fans. So it's
just
like,
wait until they watch
that's
Akers
fine,
run
man.
the ball. They're gonna then they'll get mad at Akers. I mean, they won't be happy with either
One
option.
more here, Erickson. Jonathan Taylor or Jahmyr Gibbs?
Gibbs. Easy.
Gibbs.
I'm not sitting Gibbs if Montgomery doesn't play. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't care who they're playing.
Yeah.
Like,
Craig Reynolds might not even play too.
yeah. So
Yeah, that's true.
Gibbs.
DBro, Gus Edwards or Zach Evans?
I'll go with Gus. I have no clue what to make out of this Rams backfield. I'm just gonna mention that real fast. Like,
Yeah.
I wrote it up in the primer, and I'm like, y'all can wait till Friday or Saturday, and I'm going to update this, and hopefully we get some kind of like breadcrumbs, some kind of nugget of information out of beat reporters, because I mean, it's Zach Evans, we have Royce Freeman, we re-signed Darrell Henderson, baby, and we signed Myles Gaskin. The answer's probably just they pass the ball a lot, but
Yeah. Okay, next one, Rachaad White or Javonte Williams, DBro?
Oh, I'm going Javonte. I actually was going to bring that up earlier when Erickson was talking about Jonathan Taylor and stuff. I've got Javonte at RB17 right now.
I have
Okay, and then
Javonte
the last
18.
one here, James Cook or Jerome Ford, DBro? These are a lot of guys that are all kind of in that middle RB2 range in the expert consensus rankings.
Man, I'll go with James Cook. I'm just going to bet on talent. I really think that there's a possibility where we see the usage in the Browns backfield flip even further to Kareem Hunt this week.
Would you take Javonte over both those guys?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's go to the must-sit wide receivers. Erickson, starting with you.
Must sit wide receiver. So I'm going to start with Courtland Sutton for the Denver Broncos. The Packers are a really tough matchup for wide receivers, especially with their guys coming off a bye week. Their guys are healthy. Jair Alexander's not on the injury report anymore, so that's going to be a tough test for Courtland Sutton, who has been running very hot on touchdowns, even in garbage time. Like, he's still getting the touchdowns, but Packers rank 5th in terms of fewest fantasy points per game allowed to perimeter wide receivers, so I want to sit him this week. I think that we're going to see some regression come from Russell Wilson and company in the passing game. I just don't think he's going to be throwing as many touchdowns as he has to start the year.
If you had to start somebody in this passing game, is it Sutton just because of the touchdown potential? And it's just you want to avoid everybody, or do you prefer like Judy or Marvin Mims breakout game or somebody?
I think that they're going to try to trade Judy, so they got to like pump up his stats somehow. Like the quote about Sean Payton being like, wait, like Mims is not playing this much? Like, and like you can totally read between the lines. It's like, clearly they're trying to get Judy on the field so they can pump up his trade value so they can trade him and then play Marvin Mims. So right now, I mean, I would say that they're probably more likely to keep Sutton unless the team would rather have him. I mean, Judy's younger, so that's the only reason that another team might be interested. But I don't know. The way that Steve Smith talked about Jerry Jeudy, just not a good look. And then Jeudy then followed up by basically doing nothing on Thursday night. So kind of confirming what Steve Smith was talking about.
Yeah, all of social media was like, oh man, Jerry Jeudy's coming in and be fired up. And then
10 for 203 touchdowns incoming, and that did not happen. Narrator voice. DBro, give me your must-sit receiver here.
I'm going to sit Michael Pittman. And low key, I was not expecting this when I pulled up the Colts receivers, but Cleveland operating at a top 5 rate man coverage. Michael Pittman doesn't even lead that team in target share or yards per route run against man coverage. Both of those go to Josh Downs. So he's not even their preferred option to beat man coverage, as well as he's not been good versus it. 21% target share. His yards per route run falls from 1.8 overall to 1.3, which is very tenuous level for Michael Pittman. So it's not only do the Colts target him a ton versus man coverage, he's not been good versus it. So you got to sit Michael Pittman.
I know a lot of experts say that you really shouldn't care about how good the defense, like zone versus man type stuff, sure, but you really shouldn't care like just how good a defense is and avoid them, except for on the extremes. This Browns defense is good enough on the extreme, right, that if there's ever a question, we're erring on the side of not the guy facing the Browns, right, DBro?
Yeah, and I totally understand that. My pushback against that always is if you don't like cornerback matchups, it's probably because you don't understand them. So I'm always with pushing back against that because the process is the process, man.
Erickson, give me your next must-sit receiver.
I'm looking at Diontae Johnson for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, he's expected to come back and play the Los Angeles Rams this week. He hasn't played since week 1 when he suffered a hamstring injury. But Diontae Johnson doesn't fall into the category, especially within the confines of this very underwhelming Steelers offense that you just like, oh, like plug and play. Like he's ready to go. Like I want to see him make sure he's healthy, make sure he has his full-time role back. And I think it's okay to keep him on the bench because I don't think you're going to be missing that much from him potentially in a matchup that's not even good. You know, Rams have allowed 4th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers this season. Pat Fryermuth's coming back as well. So I kind of want to see how the targets shake out. Like, is this offense looking any better after their bye week? Did they change things up at all? Is he still the target share leader? There's a lot of question marks about the Steelers offense in general. So you've made it so far or this long without playing Diontae Johnson. So I think it's okay to just kind of leave him on the bench, see how things kind of play out here and see if he reclaims that number 1 target share that George Pickens has kind of had, you know, since his injury.
If you had to start one of them, would you rather start Pickens and not Diontae Johnson?
Probably, just because he's been playing and Kenny Pickett's been targeting him as a wide receiver 1. So,
yeah. DBro, I know you're going to talk about Pickens a bit later. Who's your next must-sit receiver?
It's got to be Josh Palmer. And I'm going to caveat this with, I have not been high on Josh Palmer. Anybody that's read the primer, has followed my work, knows that. I've got to give Josh Palmer a little bit of love before I tell people to sit him, only in the sense that he has been actually good since Mike Williams has been out. 24% target share, 2.0 yards per route run. But this matchup, I think Palmer could get a shadow from L'Jarius Sneed, who is playing out of his mind this year. L'Jarius Sneed has followed a litany of amazing wide receivers on 58 to 75% of their routes. And I'm bearing the lead here, but he shadowed Calvin Ridley. He shadowed DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, and Justin Jefferson. And none of those guys exceeded 40 receiving yards in his primary coverage. That laundry list of guys got shut down by L'Jarius Sneed. What do you think Josh Palmer is going to do this week?
Palmer is a back-end wide receiver 3 in the consensus rankings. He's wide receiver 34 this week, according to the experts. Is that about where you have him, or would you go even lower, DBro?
I've got him at wide receiver 36, and considering that, like, there's other guys that I'm probably going to move ahead of him. One, depending on what happens in Seattle, I'm probably going to move Jackson Smith and Jigba above him if they're missing a few guys. But I think this is all just to tie a nice little neat bow on this. This comes down to if you have other guys, like I'll start Josh Downs. Even considering the matchup with Cleveland, I'll start Josh Downs over Josh Palmer.
Erickson, give me your last must-sit wide receiver.
Drake London for the Atlanta Falcons. He's playing on the road this week, and you don't want to trust Desmond Ridder on the road. Like I'm telling you, like the last 2 games, Desmond Ridder, 300 passing yards. Ooh, this is great. Can we stream this guy? Can we trust this guy? No can do. Because when you take him out of the dome, take him out of his comfort zone, he crumbles. And that has trickled over into London splits this year as well. So even though since week 2, basically after that one game where London basically was not involved, London has a 23% target share. He's been the number 1 guy. He's been solid. But on the road, he has not exceeded 32 receiving yards or 3 catches in the 2 road games that they've played since. So I'm very concerned about this Falcons offense overall. Playing on the road against Tampa Bay, hostile environment. I don't like it at all. we saw Ritter struggle at the end of last week's game. He had chances to get their team back into to win that game. Like, they were down 8 points in the fourth quarter, like 3 different times, and Ritter couldn't get it done. So I'm concerned about him with the pass rush that Tampa Bay is going to present, and I think it's going to have a trickle effect on Drake London as well. So Tampa Bay has strong corners, and I just don't like the matchup.
I'm not sure home games are a comfort zone for Ritter, maybe relatively speaking compared to the road, but I wasn't aware he actually had a comfort zone. He doesn't look that great in either spot, although, like you said, definitely better at home. DBro, I teased it earlier. You want to talk about George Pickens here?
Yes, I do. And for a lot of the same points that Erickson brought up with Diontae Johnson, but I think also the reemergence of Diontae Johnson is going to hurt George Pickens. He's been getting this insane volume, 23% target share, 43% of the air yards, and yet he's been the same volatile as all get out type of wide receiver that we saw last year. It's either boom, where George Pickens has wide receiver 1, wide receiver 5, wide receiver 11, wide receiver 5 outings this year, or wide receiver 38, wide receiver 65. So what happens to George Pickens, what happens to Pickens this week when Diontae Johnson comes back? He is the guy that Kenny Pickett leans on and looks to. What happens to Pickens? I think he turns right back into a pumpkin. He becomes that guy who's volatile, who's a field stretcher. The target share kind of evaporates into thin air. And even if you want to lean on the fact of, okay, these Rams outside corners are extremely good. Now, we'll see if Darion Kendrick plays this week, considering his off-the-field stuff. But they've been playing out of their minds. I do not want to invest in this Pittsburgh Steelers passing attack outside of probably Pat Freiermuth.
So I'll ask you the same thing I asked Erickson, which is, which of these two guys, George Pickens or Diontae Johnson, would you rather start?
I'm going Diontae, assuming that he's a full go, which he's already practicing in full. I don't see that he's going to go out there and not be a full go if they're going to be willing to play him, considering how long he's been out. I think he's going to fall right back into the same exact role he's always had in Pittsburgh, and that is as the wide receiver 1, as the target leader, as Kenny Pickett's safety blanket. We talked about this off air and stuff. Like, Kirk Cousins looked like a shell of himself without Justin Jefferson out there. Kenny Pickett has not looked great. He's probably going to see Diontae Johnson walk back into the huddle and be like, oh my God, I'm so happy to see you. I'm going to give you all the targets. No offense, George Pickens. I'm going to give you all the targets. Come on, let's go.
Yeah. Okay, let's do some who should I starts here. Erickson, Courtland Sutton, or Curtis Samuel this week?
Ooh. I'm going to ride the wave with Curtis Samuel. He's been really productive the last couple of weeks, and I just think that he did this last year too. He started out really hot. He obviously fizzled out a little bit as the season went on, but I think that I would just keep riding Curtis Samuel in this Commanders offense.
How about Diontae Johnson or KJ Osborne?
I think I'd probably go with Diontae in that. I just don't want any part of this Vikings offense. Like it's Monday Night Football. The world's gonna be watching, and I just think it's a really bad spot for Kirk Cousins. Like, this entire offense, honestly, I don't like it. So I would rather take the risk with Diontae off the injury.
How about Drake London or George Pickens?
I think in that case, I'd probably go with Drake London, because I know that he's still like the clear alpha, and there is a non-zero chance that, Diontae does step back in and just sees the majority of targets, and Pickens just puts up like a total goose egg. So at least Drake London, I know, will get some targets, even if I don't like his ceiling against the Falcon or against the Buccaneers. Where Pickens, it's like, if the dude doesn't catch a 70-yard touchdown, then he doesn't do anything. Like that's how he scored the majority of his points. So just
doesn't see broken coverage, he's pretty much going to do nothing.
Based on the matchup at hand against the Rams, it just doesn't seem like this is a game where that would be more likely to happen. So I would probably just play London.
So DBro, are you also going London? Because I have the same question for you.
Easy London. Yeah. Like it's not even a question.
How about Michael Pittman or Amari Cooper, DBro?
Oh, give me Amari in a landslide.
Okay. And then lastly, Josh Palmer or Rashee Rice?
Oh. I'm going to go. That's rough, man. That is a rough one, because Rashee Rice, I'm like, just watch what happens. Mahomes is going to throw a touchdown to him, and he's going to play 20% of the snaps, and he's still going to outplay Palmer. The heck with it. I'm going to go Rice.
All right, let's go to our quarterback, tight end, defense, special teams segment. Erickson, we'll start with you. Clump these guys together: QB, TE, and DST.
All right, I'm going to start with quarterback. Talked about the Broncos passing game with Courtland Sutton. I'm going to sit Russell Wilson this week. Russell Wilson kind of got exposed last week against the Chiefs. He was horrible in that game, and I think that that's going to be more of what we're going to see from him, not for what we saw during the beginning of the year when he was throwing touchdowns at a much higher rate. The Packers defense has allowed just one passing touchdown per game to opposing quarterbacks. 5th lowest percentage of passing touchdowns faced. They haven't allowed any quarterback to throw for more than 250 passing yards against them. Only one quarterback has scored 20 plus fantasy points against them, Desmond Ridder, and he had a rushing touchdown to get there. So I know it was a nice start with Russ. It seemed like he was back. I'm not so sure he's back. So I'm going to be trying to sit him against the Packers coming off their bye week. At tight end, going back to this Falcons matchup, just continuing to fade the Falcons on the road, Kyle Pitts. So he basically, yes, he is a tight end by designation, but he really more plays like the slot. And that's where Tampa Bay is really, really good against tight ends when they're lined up in the slot. 5th fewest fantasy points allowed to tight ends in the slot. And overall, the Buccaneers have been good against tight ends, allowing just 39 yards per game to the position. 3rd lowest yards per reception. So we saw it last week. Laporta got a ton of targets, not efficient. So even if Kyle Pitts is getting volume, which he has been getting more of the last couple of weeks because of the pump and passing usage with the Desmond Ridder, I'm concerned that even if he gets volume, like it's not going to be efficient because Tampa Bay is playing tight coverage against tight ends. So also, I don't think he's going to get bailed up by a touchdown. And that's usually a really big when it comes to tight ends in fantasy. The Buccaneers, and remember this, like Buccaneers are the number 1 red zone defense in the NFL. So touchdowns are going to be in limited capacity, which is why I think that all these Falcons players have low upside in this matchup on the road because I just don't think they're going to score a lot of touchdowns. So that's my concern for the Falcons overall. And then my DST to sit is Baltimore. They're playing at home against the Detroit Lions and may think, oh, like Jared Goff on the road, like maybe they're a sneaky start. You know, people have obviously been playing the Ravens because they've had a cupcake schedule. Yes, that's my point. Like they've had a cupcake schedule. Here's who they faced this year. Rookie quarterback making his first start, injured Joe Burrow, another backup quarterback, Gardner Minshew, another rookie quarterback making his first start, Kenny Pickett, Ryan Tannehill / Malik Willis. Like, and their worst game of the year was against injured Joe Burrow, where they didn't score any points from their DST. So the Lions offense and Jared Goff are humming right now. Their offensive line is number 1 in terms of PFF pass blocking. Like Goff has so much time to just rip defenses to shreds, and the Ravens have a bad pass rush. 4th lowest pressure rate generated this season. So for me, I'm trying to sit the Ravens DST against the Lions.
Kyle Pitts or Pat Freiermuth this week?
Oh my God, I hate these questions. I'll say Freiermuth.
I was sitting here thinking I was glad Erickson got that one, not me.
I'll say Freiermuth because I would rather start Jonnu Smith than Kyle Pitts. Like Jonnu Smith has been way more consistent than Pitts has been at tight end this year. So I'd start Jonnu.
My next question was Kyle Pitts or Jonnu Smith.
Well, it's Jonnu Smith, so beat you to it.
These questions are not supposed to be easy. If they were easy, our audience wouldn't care to hear them. They're supposed to be difficult choices
they
might have to be making.
Here, you know,
you could hear Erickson pucker on that last question. Like, I mean, if everybody.
There are occasional meatballs thrown in. There's the occasional, oh, that's an easy one. But yeah, these are intended to be difficult so we can help our audience who has difficult decisions to make themselves. DBro, give me your quarterback, tight end, DST.
We've talked a lot about Cole's Cash on this show already. Kirk Cousins, got to sit him if you possibly can. San Francisco is allowing, I mean, they're just shutting down opposing passing attacks. The lowest passer rating in the NFL, 3rd lowest yards per attempt. It's not going to be a good day for Captain Kirko. And for tight ends, Zach Ertz, he has been a volume play all season, and the volume is going away. Last week, his route run rate dropped to 46% as Trey McBride got more involved. So that's been the thesis of the Zach Ertz play. It's like, it's not pretty, it's not great, but it's a lot of volume. Well, and bye-bye, gone. So you got to sit Zach Ertz. You could drop him. Honestly, he's droppable. And the DST that I'm going to mention here is New England Patriots. The short analysis with this is, well, they're playing Josh Allen. Not good, people. But the other part about this is the name of the New England Patriots versus their actual production as a pass defense doesn't match up. They're 20th in yards per attempt allowed, 13th highest passer rating allowed, and the 7th highest adjusted completion rate. So Josh Allen's going to rip this week, and you do not need to play the Patriots.
I will also ask you about Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith or Zach Ertz this week?
Oh, I'll take Jonnu. Oh, I thought you were going to say Kyle Pitts.
DBro's getting the layups, man. Are you serious?
That was a fastball right down the middle, baby.
Well, first of all, I don't know if that's a layup.
It is. Ertz is
it was
now.
beautiful. I won't even lie. That was a beautiful layup. I love that meatball, baby.
The expert consensus rankings do not have that as a layup, so I'm trying to help you out here. But that's fine. We'll take the layups every now and then. Quick recap here. Must-sit running backs for Erickson is Keaontay Ingram, Alexander Mattison, Jonathan Taylor. For DBro, it's Gus Edwards, Rachaad White, and James Cook. On the wide receiver side, Erickson has Courtland Sutton, Diontae Johnson, Drake London. DBro has Michael Pittman, Josh Palmer, George Pickens. On the quarterback tight end defense, Erickson's got Russell Wilson, Kyle Pitts. In the Baltimore Ravens defense, DBro has Kirk Cousins, Zach Ertz. In the New England Patriots defense, or DBro and Erickson, I'm Ryan Wormeli. We'll see you again next time.